Hello, everyone. Oh, I forgot to close my closet. You can see my fabulous clothing and laundry that I haven't done in a few weeks because it's been a lot here. Anyway, hello. My name is Cameron Cowan. Welcome to the Cameron Journal Newshour. It occurs to me that we have a lot of new people here who may not necessarily know who I am or know a lot about me. So today, as part of the monologue, I kind of wanted to do a brief hi, hello, who is this guy that you're watching right now? Or are maybe watching later um, when this gets uploaded later. So, my name is Cameron Cowan. I'm the creative director of the Cameron Journal. We are a publication, a podcast, um, and a YouTube channel. And every week I do this show where I discuss the headlines of the week. Every Saturday I do a newsletter. Basically, the Cameron Journal is a journey. I offer research and insights to the world around us, but the Cameron Journal is a journey. We explore what's going on around us in society, in culture, in art, all this type of thing. And so between me and my lovely team of contributors, we create wonderful content that gives you something interesting to read. I had another publication called Rouges for a long time, whose slogan was "Find something interesting," um, and that interesting energy is a central part of the Cameron Journal. So we have a lot of categories, a lot of content to read, to experience. I post a lot of different videos from YouTube. I make different videos, all this type of things. So if you are watching for the very first time, or this is the first time you've seen a video, or the first time you've seen a clip, that's who I am. I am going to shoot, probably not this week, a 10 Things About Me video, because I haven't done anything like that in a while. I also might do a Get Ready With Me video where I talk about myself as well. Because I know there's so many new people, a lot of new subscribers, new people watching on different platforms, all this sort of thing. And so I just wanted to, um, briefly kind of say hello and introduce you to myself. If you want to learn a lot about my background, I would recommend going to the About page on the Cameron Journal. But the long story short is I have an undergrad in political science, I have a master's degree in diplomacy and asymmetrical warfare from Norwich University, and then I also have an MFA in creative writing from Goddard College, who is sadly now closed. Very sad. But so I've been writing and working in politics in some form since 2005. I started the Cameron Journal in 2014. If you want to go back and watch some of my old videos, they are all archived on the YouTube channel under the Cameron Journal. Or, I'm sorry, the Cameron Cowan Show, because that's what I called it at the time. And so yeah, so it's very exciting. It's a lot of fun. Tonight is I have a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. Although me and the shirt collar are gonna have some difficulties and problems. But I and my voice and throat are already on the way out, and we're only been doing this for 6 minutes. So I have to go grab something to drink here in a second. But um, it's tonight we have about a group of stories, but this has been a very long week. I am a little bit tired. I was a little bit sick last week over the weekend, which is probably the reason why my throat is like, oh my god, you're doing so much talking today. Because I had a recording earlier, I had errands to run, it's all this sort of thing. And so, um, it's been a lot of fun. We will be having a special broadcast tomorrow night. President Trump is planning on addressing the nation at 9 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. Sort of not really a State of the Union because we don't have those in years when presidents take to office, but he is doing a joint session of Congress to talk about the progress that he has made during his first 5 weeks in office and what's coming down the road, which will probably set the news narrative for about the rest of the week. So I will be doing a live broadcast of that tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern. I will schedule it after this. So if you're following me on social media, especially Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, where there are events, those will be up later tonight to remind you to come tomorrow. And then we'll be live commentary and I'll be broadcasting it here. So we'll have tons of fun. Those are always fun. The address will probably be at least an hour, maybe hour and a half. So bring your drinks, bring your popcorn. It's gonna be a little bit of a late night for us East Coasters, but we always have a ton of fun. So that's kind of what we're about this week. Like I said, I'm super, super tired, but I have gathered a bunch of news stories, including I cleaned out my Twitter bookmarks of a couple things that I saved this week that I knew I wanted to talk about. Last Saturday's newsletter was talking a lot about the very tawdry affair of Trump, Vance, and Zelensky at the Oval Office meeting last Friday. And I talked about that a lot in the newsletter, and I talked about a real retreat from the traditional ideas of American power. There's an interesting article from this guy on Twitter, this post that I want to read a little bit of because it's very interesting. But most importantly, we're gonna dive right into a really great story. I have it here. And it was actually, I was going to get to it last week, but didn't quite get there. And it was All Men Want to Be Heroes by Chris Arnond. And we're going to dive into that first. But before we do that, because my throat is already going, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go get something to drink. Now, I'm a one-man show, so I don't have anyone to bring me stuff. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the intro scene up, and then I'll be right back. So, hold that thought. Don't nobody go anywhere. I'll be right back momentarily. Hang on, everyone. All right, that's much better. We'll lubricate the throat a little bit. That's going to be awkward for the recording because there's going to be dead time, but we'll deal with that. Let's turn to headlines, though. Let me do this, and let me grab this, and here we go. So, one of the topics I have written about a lot in my life is men, manhood, and masculinity. I remember I gave my first sort of talk on masculinity and manhood when I was 20. Was I even 21 when I did that? I might have only been 20. And I was talking about my journey and how I was still kind of figuring that out, and I was very confused about all of that and what that meant. And so I've written about it a lot. I used to be a writer at the Good Men Project, all this sort of thing. And so when this little thing came across my feed, and the Free Press is not liberal, by the way, I kind of dove in and I'm kind of like, okay, let's explore. I'm not going to read the first part, but I'm going to get right to the kind of the center of it. It says here, when I saw this, he's talking about this this image in a bar that had happened. When I saw this, all men need to feel like the hero, if not over the course of their lifetime, but then at least every now and then. Most get their sense of worth from rescuing, protecting, building, solving, and for being appreciated for doing so. I've seen this truth on Wall Street, where I used to work, and where men would feel like heroes after closing a deal. I've seen it in crack houses when I've been reporting, where people speak of the guys who went cold turkey like they just got Purple Hearts. I saw it too in the essay by Mana Afsari, published by the Free Press earlier this month, about young male Americans who feel like it's harder and harder to find a way to do something big and important, and that's why they feel an affinity with the man who says he wants to make America great again. As one of them admitted, I always wanted to do something great. Most of the kids the author spoke to were pretty well educated, and a lot of them found meaning in talking about Homer and Virgil, ancient poets who understood the importance of heroes. It reminded me of an article in The Nation I read earlier this year, which is all about the dangers of epic poetry. The writer Orlando Reed argues that the ancient hero archetype is corrosive, bad, and unnecessary, an outdated concept of masculinity, which promotes imperialism. I thought at the time, this writer is simply wrong. I thought of that dive bar. A society should never entirely dismiss the appeal of the hero archetype, especially in the way it resonates with younger men. Rather than to try to make it profane, we should understand the need for it and the good that can come from it. Being a hero doesn't mean conquering and ruling. It means first and foremost serving a community, acting selflessly. The hero trades their physical suffering for a communal praise, and a certain status, even if that means throwing themselves in a bathroom door to unlock the intoxicated. The trouble is this archetype is kind of at odds with the modern liberal project, which favors the individual over the community, and preaches that each of us can create a bespoke identity, like a tailor-made suit. Young people are supposed to break out of the mold instead of trying to follow in others' footsteps. But from what I've observed in my years of walking cities from Phnom Penh, Cambodia to Buenos Aires, Argentina, the bulk of members of society choose to, and would rather, play a stock character. People want a role in life, the hero, the joker, the damsel in distress. I am hardly the first person to notice this. The very human desire to model ourselves on something that has been studied for decades, not only by cultural critics like Rene Girard, but also by biologists like Richard Dawkins. In other words, it's not just nurture, it's in our nature. What's hardwired into our bodies is the landscape on which culture is built. Probably the expert on all of this was sociologist Irving Goffman, who spent decades observing how people occupy cultural roles, and basically concluded that when we are in public, we're basically all actors with a part to play. Like Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage. To put it another way, cultures are a bit like video games. They provide citizens with a limited array of characters to play, each with different strengths and weaknesses. A successful society will accept a person's desire to play a role and do its best to encourage and promote healthy archetypes that ordinary people can aspire to fulfill. In Japan, it might be the dedicated craftsperson. In England, the eccentric tinkerer. In France, the 5-hour smoking alone pontificating on stuff he doesn't really understand at the cafe guy. But every society needs to give men the opportunity to play the hero. It must praise the men who risk their physical safety for the greater good, not only the ones who are rescue workers or soldiers, but also the ones stringing power lines or drilling oil or harvesting food, providing society with necessities to run. We must also value the men who protect, build, and solve, the carpenters, the engineers, the husbands, fathers, and truckers. Without culturally approved ways to be a hero, a black market and unapproved antisocial ones will pop up. These usually involve proving your worth through crime or violence. Ah, but isn't the male hero violent too? Isn't that why we've tried to move on from that archetype? Fine. Achilles is not exactly the character I want young men in modern America to be molded on. That doesn't mean we can't provide positive hero archetypes, ones that protect the community from threats, keep the lights on, and if needed, bust open a bathroom door in a dive bar. People are obsessed with the angry young men for Trump, but what good will come of dismissing these kids as sexist and insisting that hero is an old-fashioned idea? Far better to celebrate men for wanting to save a man trapped in a bathroom or rush into a burning building. Who cares if all they're trying to do is get praise from a woman or a free drink? America would be a better place. This this is hard. One of the things that we have tried to do over the last decade is, I would say, knock off the edges of some of the, shall we say, more negative aspects of men, manhood, and masculinity. Abuse, alcoholism, sexual predation, all this sort of thing. And I think the calling has been for men to seize upon their virtue and not upon their baser instincts. And we kind of see this in the dating market especially. Women are not looking for a protector, a solver. They're not looking for that necessarily. They're looking for an equal partner with the same level of emotional intelligence as they do to meet them where they are emotionally and to be as aware of and conscious of not only his own emotions but her emotions as well, and to do things to promote the emotional health and well-being of all parties involved. Um and in a weird way, women want men to lead on that. Like, they want that leader, but they want it to be on a term that is emotionally fulfilling for them. And I think that's a very interesting idea. And what this article I think is really doing is kind of pushing back on that and saying, look, emotions are not our forte. You know, all these virtues, all this social justice warrior, woke DEI stuff is not our thing. Here's what we're good at. We're good at keeping the lights on. We're good at stringing power lines. We're good at busting down a door. Let us get back to the stuff that we're good at and leave the other soft skill sort of stuff to women. And I think women have given a very strong signal it's not good enough anymore. The problem, and in any time you read a post on dating on Twitter, you see this, um, is you have, I think, a certain pushback and idea that there should be more. You know, that what all this traditional stuff about, wanting to be a hero and wanting to be that guy and to be honored and venerated and given praise and all that type of thing, that's not good enough. Men have been pretty one note for most of human history. And I think there's a certain desire to be more. And I think the modern economy, the modern way things are, really, really sort of promotes that idea. That you can't just have hard technical skills. You have to have soft people skills too, especially in an age of AI. Relationships looking for soft skills and emotional intelligence. And the reality is, I think a lot of guys aren't really interested in all of that stuff. And I think that's kind of the underlying message here is that, the truth. I think the one of the reasons why traditional masculinity has such appeal, especially on for the right, is that it's much more simple and much more straightforward. And I think the under kind of served part of the story is talking about how people want to serve in a role. They want to know what their place in society is, rather than creating their place in society. And I think to some degree we're at a bit of loggerheads because we're having a bit of pushback between the desire to have that bespoke identity and to not be in the mold and to kind of create your own world, and a desire for a lot of people to say, no, I really just want to know what I'm supposed to do and have clear rules and a path outlined. Thank you very much. So I can just get up and do it and not have to worry about, oh, what do I feel? What do I think? What's this? What's that? What's the other thing? All this type of thing. They just want to slot themselves in. I am this. This is what I do. I am X, therefore Y, without having to go through, quite frankly, the creative disaster that is kind of forging your own your own identity and finding your own place in the world, and more often than not creating your own place in the world. And I think that's an underserved part of it, but I think men especially, a generation ago, not that long ago, a good man was a provider and protector. If he could make money, take care of his family, job done. If he could prevent his family from being harmed, job done. And that was it. That was the job, sort of thing. And now the job's gotten more complicated. Now there's kind of more demanded of, oh yeah, I want to, there's kind of this emotional stuff, this soft skills, these people skills, this caring stuff, this equity in housework and child rearing. We hear the phrase emotional labor. Women don't just want men to do tasks as they're told to do them. Women want to not even have to think about that it needs to be done because it's already been taken care of. That's what taking over the mental labor of it is. It's not that she wants to direct her husband to go do this list of things. It's that he will do them without even her having to think about it. It'll already be done. And so the list of things that, men are to do has gotten a lot longer. And here's the reality. None of it's very praiseworthy. None of it's very glamorous. No one's gonna make you the man. It doesn't do any of that. It doesn't provide any of that ego boosting sort of thing. Um, and I think that is, and we see that in the economy as well, by the way, in terms of jobs and things like that. A lot of, the problems, a lot of the jobs that we have created are very low status and won't get you laid. And so this is a problem sort of thing. And that creates, more difficulties of, if you're a man today, how do you find your heroic moment? How do you find that chance to have status in your community? How do you find the opportunity to be able to, feel like you've actually fulfilled expectations? You're doing your job. You've ticked all the boxes. That's a lot harder now. A lot harder. And I think that I think has left a lot of men feeling adrift. So I think when Trump comes along and says, I'm going to make America great again, which again is a phrase that anyone can apply whatever they're feeling onto it and feel like it means that to them, which is why it's magical. Um, you, I think part of that is let us have our role. Let us have our heroic moment. Let us just slot in, do the job, tick the boxes, no more than 5, please, thank you, and then we can move on and feel like we've really done it in society. And anything beyond that is now considered liberal and woke and kind of anti-masculine and all this sort of thing. And I find that very interesting. And we can get into conversations about agreeableness and conscientiousness and all this type of thing. And I know somebody who's very good at what they do, but they're very low in agreeableness and conscientiousness, and it gets them in trouble all the time. Um, but there is definitely I think a sea change of wanting to take a step backwards into a masculinity that is in itself intrinsically simple, heroic, and grant status. And I think one of the issues with masculinity as it's been redefined, um, as it has been redefined by, the liberal project over the last decade or so, is that the new masculinity does not confer a heroic moment. It does not confer status as such. It's very unglamorous. And it also requires you to kind of forge your own path and figure out your own thing and create your own sort of sense of normal, um, rather than just being able to slot into a spot, into a box, and know that you're doing it in an extremely unconscious way. That's difficult. I don't have much more to say on that, other than I think we're definitely going to see a sort of step back and reversion. However, I don't know how well that's going to work out in terms of dating and mating and children and all this sort of thing, because men are getting much more conservative and women are getting more liberal. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out long term. I think I think one of the difficulties for young men today is the standards for women have changed. And these two things are going to continue to conflict moving forward. Um, I guess in this way, I'm glad I'm not 10 years or 15 years younger and have to worry about such things. I'm old, or getting there. I'm 37 in a couple months, April, in the end of April. So I don't have to worry about such things anymore. I'm old, so. But I feel for young men who are having this fun. I thought this article was extremely insightful about this, and yeah, it's at the Free Press if you want to if you want to read it. So, oh, wrong scene. Here we go. There we go. Let's move along. Oh, yes, let's talk about this now. This is good. So, in the ongoing saga of what are Democrats going to do? How does the party get itself together? Here's what happened. So, this weekend, or I guess last month, a group of moderate Democratic consultants, campaign staffers, elected officials, and party leaders gathered in Loudoun County for a retreat where they plotted their party's comeback, and we got their takeaways. This has been the talk of Twitter for days. It's a story originally from Politico, but this is the important part. 1. The party should embrace patriotism, community, and traditional American imagery. 2. Democrats should ban far-left candidate questionnaires and refuse to participate in forums that create ideological purity tests. And, quote, move away from the dominance of small-dollar donors whose preferences may not align with the broader electorate, unquote. They should push back against far-left staffers and groups that exert a disproportionate influence on policy and messaging. Candidates should get out of elite circles into real communities, tailgates, gun shows, local restaurants, churches. And the party needs to own the failures of democratic governance in large cities and commit to improving local government. Now, let me say right off the bat, this last one about failures of democratic governance in large cities and commit to improving local government, that's huge. And I'll tell you why. One of the easiest, biggest right-wing talking point send-ups of the last several years is America's cities are burning. This particularly got bad in 2020 when you had the George Floyd riots and things just kind of ran amok nationwide. The fact that big cities have the problems they do with drugs, with homelessness, with all this type of thing, and that they're not clean, safe, lovely places to be, live, work, visit, all this type of thing, is a huge mark against the Democratic Party. It just is. There's no two ways about it. You're a party that wants to run the country, but you can't run Minneapolis. You can't run Seattle. You sure as hell can't run New York. I mean, the problems just sort of pile on. The fact that Democrats haven't taken that very seriously, got all the mayors together and said, look, it's time to get stuff done. It's time to clean things up. It's time to make America's cities great again, sort of thing. Is a huge liability and a huge open sore. The rest of this stuff, honestly, is stuff that even I have said. I do think, catering to the far left fringe of the party is probably not a good thing. And if you want to win elections in Iowa, you need to get more to the center, and I think that's probably a good idea. I think candidates getting out into real communities and all this type of thing is probably a good idea, mostly because a lot of those places have become ideological dead zones for Democrats. The only people in those spaces are Republicans. The only people. I mean, the other day I went on a podcast called Savage Unfiltered, and they were very surprised because left-wing people don't usually go in those places and spaces. Tomorrow I'm doing another one where we've had back and forth on, you seem really liberal. Are you sure you want to come on this show? And I'm like, yes, I do. Because too often times these spaces become just intellectual dead zones. As far as the not catering to small donors and whose preferences may not align with the broad electorate, that one I don't necessarily agree with, because that's a hit against Bernie Sanders voters. That's Bernie Sanders popularized the just send me $5, just send $1 type of small micro donor fundraising in 2016 that has now become very common. But he was the first to really do it and get a good operation of it going. That is them clearly saying we need to divorce ourselves from the socialist wing of the Democratic Party. And it's kind of funny that it's in part two, because it's also about far left candidate questionnaires from think tanks and groups that are much more to the left than the rest of the party. That clearly is we need to dump the far left and we need to dump Bernie Sanders voters. And that's a lot. I mean, that's not necessarily the best, the best strategy. Yeah, someone comments, Dems really do not cater to the far left. Yeah, I mean, if the Dems were catering to the far left, they would have definitely gone harder on Gaza, which was a huge issue for the far left. We did not get a plan for universal health care. Um, in the 2024 election, we got, oh, we're going to protect and expand the Affordable Care Act sort of thing, which was kind of the milquetoast version, but not Medicare for all. No, that's why I'm saying this is clearly a slight against Bernie voters and like the farthest fringe of the party. I think one of the problems here is that, and Republicans don't have this problem as much as Democrats do. Here's what happens. Certain activists say things like defund the police, for example. And even though that was never the official party platform of the Democratic Party, because leftists said it, the right immediately makes it part of the Democratic Party, and Democrats, not wanting to necessarily go against the farther left side of the party, don't necessarily come out and condemn it and redefine themselves away from it or in a different way around it or whatever have you. And so you end up with this situation where the Democratic Party and Democrats end up being responsible for a lot of things that the party never really adopted, except for a fringe few. And you even have some people in Congress who've done this, Ilhan Omar, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, all this type of thing. They'd say some crazy things and then it becomes dialogue and it becomes branded as part of the Democratic, ideas, and the far right goes crazy with it. It's every podcast, every YouTube channel, and all this sort of thing, and it goes absolutely nuts. I don't necessarily agree with this point in so much as the Democratic Party needs to be the party of progress. It needs to be the party of moving things forward. But I think, and I don't think this is a policy issue, because I think what we consider in this country the far left, which in most of the rest of the world would be considered quite moderate, is not, there's a lot of great ideas there. I think the messaging needs to be better so it's more palatable and doesn't just do the RNC's job for them. Half the problem with this stuff is that the Republicans' job is done for them. I have another article coming up about Trump where he ran an ad that said Kamala Harris is for they, them, and Trump is for you. And that ad probably won in Pennsylvania. And that, that the changing of the messaging on a lot of this stuff, I think is going to be very important. And I think the way to do that is to come up with a very specific, short emphasis on short policy program to solve problems in this country. That's very, very important. We have some comments. Yes. Yes and no. Yes and no. Since Harris lost, two parties have gotten the blame. One, DNC consultants who sucked all the energy out of the campaign, which I agree with. And two, yes, the far left has gotten blamed, but it's gotten blamed for two ways. One, staying home over Gaza. Two, making Gaza a big deal when it's nationally unpopular. And then three, I think also for doing what I described, by taking very loud, unpopular stances that then get grafted onto the Democratic Party agenda that the rest of the party doesn't really want. And I think the feeling, especially for a lot of more moderate Democrats, is that the far left of the party is dragging it down. Because you have these far left things being said, they're not really part of the party platform, but they become popular on social media, and then all of a sudden, you can't win elections in Iowa. How are you going to sell that in Kansas? Sort of thing. And so you end up with this weird thing where, and here's I think what would solve this. Embrace the far left for their ideas, but don't let the Republicans define you. This is the thing in communications and messaging. If you don't define yourself in the marketplace, someone will define you for you. So you have to come out and say who you are, what you stand for, what you want to do when elected. Here's the problem the Democrats get stuck in. And I'm going to address this comment right now. Democrats don't define themselves in the marketplace. They let the Republican Party and the right-wing crazies on podcasts and elsewhere define the Democratic Party for them. So people get ideas in their head of what they think the Democrats are without ever actually finding out, and the Democrats have no counter to any of it. They never come back and say, no, that's not who we are, we're this. that's a crazy group, we don't like them, sort of thing. Like, if you don't define yourself, someone will define you for you. And the problem Democrats have is they're not defining themselves in the marketplace. They're letting Republicans define them for them. And this is why you end up with this problem where someone on the far left says something absolutely nuts, and the Democratic Party never says anything against it. The right wing seizes onto it, and it becomes part of the narrative. The Democrats need to learn how to control the narrative. And if they can control the narrative, they can actually move some of this policy stuff forward. Because there are good ideas. I do think we should have universal health care. 110% we should. No one should go without health care in this country. From Hawaii to Maine, Alaska to Florida. Nobody should go without health care in this country. And I think if you can redefine how that's talked about in the marketplace, you can get a groundswell of support around that. But you have to be careful with how you message it. You have to be careful about who talks about it. And you have to make sure that you're defining that issue. The Republican Party isn't defining that issue. And I think this is this is part of the problem. Is they're not defining themselves well in the marketplace. This comment is prescient. Sure, tankies suck, but the push to go for the right will never win them an election. People just vote for the Republican. Yes, I agree with you there. Absolutely. That's why I think you need to take the ideas of the far left, but not their messaging. I'm saying it's a narrative issue. In terms of there's lots of great ideas. Like, let's get money out of politics. Say less. Like, yes, get rid of Citizens United. Like, get rid of corporate donors and billionaire donors. Say no more. Like, let's do it. But I think you have to change the messaging and change the narrative so that when you have really kind of crazy things come out of some of these far left activist groups and whatnot, it doesn't become part of the grafted onto the party in the grand narrative. And progressive policies are insanely popular. And we know that from polling from 2024 that when voters were shown Kamala Harris proposals, but her name wasn't on them, people liked them better. Again, it's a narrative issue. It's a narrative issue, not necessarily a policy problem as such. I think there's definitely a will within the party to advocate for more progressive things, especially on a subject like healthcare, different things like that. I think there are some things that are losing issues, like open borders. That's not going to work. Not many people want that. It's not popular. But I think you need to focus on the issues that you can win on, and most importantly, quit letting the GOP define you. And this also gets into a new left media ecosystem and, competing in the arena of ideas and all this type of thing. That's a whole other conversation that I'll be having again. There's a great panel show with me and David Beckemeyer and Jesse Hirsch. You can go watch about that. We're doing another one on David's show here soon. And we're going to keep that conversation going. Okay, let's move on, because this has been fun, but we've spent a lot of time on this, and we have other stories to get to. So, this one, as a journalist, is concerning. So, as we know, on Friday, the AP and Reuters were not allowed into the meeting with Zelensky, but this all started earlier in the week. And it says here, in the White House briefing room Tuesday, the Trump administration announced its latest steps to tighten its grip on the message it sends out and the news coverage it receives. No longer would the White House Correspondents Association, made up of news outlets that cover the White House, determine how they will share coverage of President Trump at major events where space is limited. Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt told the assembled reporters the White House would make that determination instead. Leavitt said the Media Association previously had dictated who was able to report directly on Trump, and with this move she was returning power to the people. Quote, legacy outlets who have participated in the press pool for decades will still be allowed to join, fear not. Leavitt said from the White House lectern, we will also be offering the privilege to well-deserving outlets who have never been allowed to share in this awesome responsibility. The television pool will not be affected, despite the president's differences with many major networks. Before entering electoral politics, Trump was a frequent subject of tabloid and television attention, and then a reality TV star. Press outlets pool their resources when coverage by all would be impractical. A selection of print, video, radio, online, and photo news organizations alternate in doing the reporting. The Trump administration has already barred the Associated Press, a mainstay of those pools, from covering major events because it has not changed its guidance for calling the body of water between Mexico and Florida the Gulf of America rather than the Gulf of Mexico. In free countries like the United States, as leaders don't get to pick who covers them day in and day out. Political reporter Eugene Daniels, the head of the White House Correspondents Association, told NPR's Ari Shapiro Tuesday evening on All Things Considered. Levitt already has invited once fringe figures from far-right outlets into the press room to ask questions. They include reporters for conspiracy-minded Gateway Pundit, Steve Bannon's podcast, and Lindell TV, started by the My Pillow magnate Mike Lindell, rather. While ideological journalists have attended White House briefings for decades, she has amplified their role. It is surreal to watch these so-called new media people asking softball, ludicrous questions to Trump and Levitt, another White House reporter said, speaking on condition of anonymity for fear of repercussions from a boss or the administration. I never thought I'd see plants and press briefings of the highest seat of American power. The AP filed suit over the ban, saying the White House violated its First Amendment to free speech rights and its Fifth Amendment procedural rights, as it had no opportunity to appeal the decision internally. At a hearing on Monday, U.S. District Court Judge Trevor McFadden, a Trump appointee, pushed Justice Department lawyers to reconsider the administration's stance towards the AP, yet the judge also questioned why the Correspondents Association had such discretion over who participated. The White House appears to have either taken inspiration or refuge from the judge's words, with Levitt's buoyant announcement the very next day. She was flanked by television screens showing a map of the southeastern U.S., each stamped with the word victory in all capital letters. It showed the Gulf of Mexico marked as the Gulf of America, Trump's preferred term. The AP's refusal to change its stylebook to reflect the president's preference, expressed in an executive order on his first day in office, led to the ban, Trump and Levitt have said. Judge McFadden suggested that it sounded like a viewpoint discrimination, something the courts have found violates the First Amendment. Yet he declined the news agency's request for an emergency decree to force the administration to back off the ban. Instead, he set a hearing for March 20th. You're going to see way more of this, by the way. Way more. They're not playing around this time. They're going to pick and choose who they like, who they want. Meanwhile, the application to the press room is open, and I have applied. So I guess we'll see if I'm going to trundle down to Washington and see if I can get a question in. Wouldn't that be hilarious? Little old me at the White House press briefing. That would certainly make for an interesting news hour. This story I don't want to get into a lot because we kind of already talked about what's wrong with the Democrats in this news hour, but I did want to briefly talk about I would say the failures of Democratic leadership so far. So one of the major frustrations with especially Hakeem Jeffries, who's the House Minority Leader, and Chuck Schumer, who's Senate Minority Leader, is that Democrats aren't doing enough. And I think there's a big push on the Democratic side on the left to say, oh my goodness, why aren't you guys doing anything? Do something. Anything, but don't just sit around. And this expression was really kind of played out by Rachel Maddow, who called him out. I'm not going to play the video, but who called him out and was like, when are you going to get busy? Like, what's going to happen here? And he's kind of like, well, we're doing stuff and we believe and all this sort of thing. And it was just not, it was just not helpful. And it was not a reflection of, I think, the gravity of the moment. This quote from her I thought was very interesting. It said, quote, policy doesn't feel like the main conversation. We are in the middle of a ketamine-fueled, middle-of-the-night autocratic power grab, rendering Congress irrelevant, making the rule of law an afterthought, if not a joke. And the comments here are, yeah, they're not great. One says, this Congress has proved itself to be inept, incompetent, self-serving, lazy, and corrupt to the core. It says here, Representative Jeffries still fails to grasp that law and order has never mattered to Donald Trump or the elites that we're fighting against. These very elites purchased Trump's freedom by buying the highest court in the land, which in turn granted him total immunity, allowing him to declare himself king. Yet Jeffries and the Dems believe that filing lawsuits will slow this traitor down when they should be pulling the damn fire alarm. Stop bringing sensibilities to a gunfight with thugs and hoes. And it just gets worse. I mean, it just keeps going. It gets way, way worse. If he's the best the Democrats have to offer, we have a problem. He's a good guy, but this is not enough. I mean, it's just, it's bad. It's bad. It's a bit of a difficult, a sad and difficult situation. Again, we've already crapped on the Democrats tonight and some of their ideas and all this type of thing. But the fact that there seems to be a little bit of intractability from Democrat leadership right now is a huge frustration in the party. And as someone who's trying to, I think, encouraging us to confront the problems we have and some of the actions that Trump has taken, even though a lot of them are blocked in the courts right now and all this type of thing, the fact that leadership is stridently saying, yes, we are not going to vote for a single thing, and here's our 3-point plan of what we're going to do to gum up the works, and he's just kind of like, well, we're doing stuff, whatever, doesn't bring us much solace. No, does it? No, it doesn't. So it's, oh, we have some spam in the chat, but that's okay. So moving right along from that, so this bit is interesting. This was an ABC news poll, and it said that the big headline is Trump's LGBTQ policies are his most popular stance by far. 53 to 37% approve, even while everything else is split or worse. The sirens are incapable of blowing louder. Adapt or die. The LGBTQ movements must become more popular or they will eventually lose political support. I keep hammering on this point because, frankly, I have yet to see any evidence of them pivoting. The gay rights movement infamously pivoted away from a scolding message to a love is love campaign in the 2000s for a similar reason. This is simply how politics works. Some folks are treating this as if I, a rando on the internet, am the one deciding this ultimatum, as if they couldn't see what's happened to the police reform and pro-immigration movements over the last few years. Movements with cases to making to effectively sell their cases. And this... Remember how I just mentioned the Trump's commas for they, them, added a million times for a reason? The reality, and here's the top line number. Number of poll questions, 18, approved 53%, disapproved 37%. And looking at, Doge is way down, foreign policies in the gutter, crime in the basement, healthcare is on parking level 3, all this sort of thing. It's, in all this is an aggregate poll conducted between January 20th and February 24th, 49 polls, and found that, people are looking forward to this, and they're happy that, that I think things are happening on that end of things, like banning transgender athletes from sports and all this type of thing. This reinforces my thesis that people don't mind LGBT people, but they don't want to think about them every day. They know they exist, but they want them to exist kind of over there, away, sort of. So you have to think about it every day. You know it's there, but you have to think about it. It doesn't really affect your life. I think one of the problems, and we saw this less with LGB and more with T and Q, is that the trans issue immediately became an everyday thing. It was in media. It was in the schools. It was in, sports, all this sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, it's like everywhere at once. And especially for the low information voter that does not read doesn't watch this show. And, and does not read all this stuff and go through all this stuff. You end up with this impression, entirely false, but this impression that all of a sudden the trans people are everywhere, and what are we going to do about trans people, and so-and-so changing their name, and don't dead name, and pronouns in bio, and all this sort of thing. I think for a lot of people it was just too much too fast. It affected their everyday lives. They are fine that it exists, but please do it over there, away from like me and my normal life sort of thing. And we can debate whether that's a good policy stance to take. And we can talk about, maybe people should be a little bit more open-minded about this stuff. And that's a whole other conversation. The point is that I think people are ready for sort of a breather, a take back of it all, and kind of a reset away from what seemed like an onslaught into the daily life. And again, I'm not saying trans people are doing this, not by far. Love all my trans people. If you're trans and watching this show, thank you so much for coming. We love you. This is a safe space, and I am fully on board with much of that agenda. I support people being able to define who they are, their own gender. I have not had the most masculine gender expression in my life myself, and I carry a Michael Kors handbag. And with a lovely wallet bought by a dear friend of mine. So it's not like I'm fitting in like the man box myself. But the point being is that for the average everyday person who's never given two thoughts about their gender their entire lives, this was a lot. And so I'm not surprising that this number is here, although I will be interested to see what it does over time. So this will be a story that we'll be watching and catching up on as time goes on. What are we up to? Like 15 trans athletes. This is right-wing framing. It definitely is. And this is a narrative issue. So one of the problems that we oftentimes get with these stories is a new thing happens, a new thing gets traction, a new thing gets out there, and it gets defined by the right wing as terrible, awful, negative, whatever have you. Yes, the reality is, even in the NCAA, the number of trans athletes, you could fit them in a convention hall with room to spare and catering. It's not as big of a problem as people think it is, and that's kind of my point, is that even though the reality of it is shockingly small, even with the military, I think it was, a few thousand of a force of, checks notes, 2.5 million. The reality is that you ended up with this sort of narrative starting, and it was in people's everyday lives. The right wing kind of dialed into that anger, that uncomfortableness, that people never really thought about their gender, don't want to, but they're seeing it sort of everywhere because it's coming up a lot. Again, this is not a reflection of reality. This is a reflection of narrative. Again, please copy and paste in here what I just said a few minutes ago about you have to redefine the narrative. And I think when it comes to LGBT stuff, it's a narrative issue. And ironically, this is kind of the point that this user made, and this is why I saved the story, is the gay rights movement infamously pivoted away from a scolding message to a love is love campaign in the 2000s for a similar reason. This is simply how politics works. That it's a narrative issue. Pure and simple, it's a narrative issue if there ever was one. And that is how politics works. But don't fear. I think there's life after this, actually. And I think we're going to be okay simply because you're going to have a pullback, you're going to have a reset, and I think with a slight shift in messaging, by normalizing the trans experience, which really big trans influencers like Buck Angel, who I kind of know, Brianna Wu, who I get in fights with on Twitter, all this type of thing are kind of starting to push forward that narrative of, hey, we're normal people too. We're not out to get ya. And I think I went through that with gay people in the early 2000s, and I think that's going to be an important narrative shift moving forward. Now, here I agree with you. Yes, maybe Dems should actually grow a spine and push back instead of running to the right anytime they have to stand on their own principles. Yes, this is what I get about narrative control. This is an issue that if you, again, what I said a few minutes ago, if you don't define it, it will be defined for you. I think this one definitely, got out ahead of it. I think part of the problem, especially with the trans issue thing, is the mainstream part of the Democratic Party didn't really want to get out in front of it. Although, interesting, Joe Biden in a State of the Union said trans healthcare is important and we're doing it. and Americans have a right to it, sort of thing. I think there was not sort of a mass adoption of the party of saying, talking about it, messaging it, and getting people comfortable with it. I think that is, I think that's also part of the problem. So yeah, I agree, but I think it's also a narrative issue. If you control the narrative, you can stop the GOP from framing it. And that's very important, moving forward on not just LGBT stuff, but a lot of other stuff. This I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on. But this one was in the dialogue, and I thought it was interesting. This was a video of Timothy Chalamet talking at the SAG Awards. Um, and he said, quote, "The truth is I'm really in pursuit of greatness. I know people don't talk like that, but I want to be one of the greats. I'm inspired by the greats. I want to be up there, Timothy Chalamet." And this kind of led into a whole dialogue about, cringe and, you know, ooh, don't be cringe. It's okay to be great. It's okay to achieve. It's okay to strive for greatness. And that we should be celebrated for striving for greatness and not being, quiet and mediocre and all this sort of thing. And the comments that was interesting, but I this one kind of it every once in a while I watch something that really just kind of screws me up. I actually want to follow this person. And I was really, for me personally, as someone who's lived a crazy, amazing, magical life, and who always felt like everyone was kind of off put because I was too smart and I knew too much and I was a braggart and everyone was kind of like, you're too much, calm down, quiet down, all this type of thing. There was a little part of me, like my inner child, that was like, yes, finally. But I also was wondering, I also kind of was also wondering, like, what was the point of cringe ever to make things low effort? Was the point of cringe, to, not take yourself too seriously, to like, to take things, all this type of thing? And I think there's kind of two competing narratives here. I think one is there's the people that, really want to be great and want to achieve and want to be honored for trying and going for the top, and even if they don't they'll make them on the stars. And then people that are kind of like, look, dude, calm down, live your life. It's not that easy. It's incredibly hard, all this type of thing. And we're already watching a very successful actor early in his career talk about this. And I feel like there's just kind of these two competing narratives of, it's kind of like when Harry met Sally. Sally gets criticized for being high maintenance, but then also but also is desirable because she's high maintenance. It's kind of the same problem of, yeah, greatness. One of the keys to greatness is to do great things but make it look incredibly easy. When I was a musician years ago, I was working on these pieces and I was working super hard, and one of my teachers said, "Here's the problem. You're working really hard and you're getting the job done, but you look like you're working hard." And I'm kind of like, yeah, 'cause it's hard. What's your point? Talent, art, is to do the incredibly hard thing but make it look incredibly easy. Make it look incredibly effortless. I had to consciously do this because the level I played at was very difficult and I was playing very hard stuff and all this sort of thing. And so it was sort of a challenge to make it, sort of look easy and effortless. And I think one of the things about, someone who's really great is you kind of cross over from this sort of, oh, I'm trying so hard, I'm trying to achieve, to, oh, it seems effortless. Some people find that with this show. I'll get comments to be kind of like, oh my God, how can you talk to these people for 45 minutes? How can you do 59, minutes of, talking about the news and everything and make it seem so easy? Well, I've been doing it for 10 years. But it's that point, and you can go watch some old videos from the show. from when 2014 they weren't nearly as good. There's that point where there's that crossover where you get so good at it because you have tried and you've achieved and you've fallen down and you picked yourself up and all this type of thing that then it becomes seemingly effortless. And I think it was just an interesting thing that I was contemplating with my own self and my own history and my own past about being able to make something effortless and not look like you're trying so hard. For your consideration, I hear comments. We need 4-hour streams. Oh my god. I don't know that my throat or I would even survive that, but maybe one day. As we're wrapping up this evening, we have a story from Mark Zandi. He is the chief economist at Economics Massachusetts. We're already getting in some early GDP numbers from Moody's. There's also another one going around from Atlanta Fed. The economy is beginning to contract. It says here, the economy appears to be gagging on the uncertainty created by the haphazard economic policy making happening in D.C. Retail sales, manufacturing production, real consumer spending, home sales, and most telling consumer confidence are all down meaningfully in the past month or two. Real GDP is tracking only 1.2% annualized so far in the first quarter, with a big downward revision this past week. Given all the weak data, the Atlanta Fed's tracker says GDP is actually set to decline in the quarter unless the economy soon picks up. The tariff wars, DOGE cuts to jobs and government programs and agencies, and deportations are sowing confusion, which puts a pall on investment, hiring, and spending. Even the Fed says it has put interest rate policy on hold until it gets some clarity about where economic policy is going. That may not be for a while as the government shutdown is looming, and another scary Treasury debt limit drama is sure to play out this spring. Lawmakers need to get it together soon, or the economy will go from gagging to choking. And so we're seeing sadness, GDP, consumer spending, fixed investment, inventory investment, fixed investments, buildings and equipment, inventory as products, government, and net trade. And I hung on to that and thought it was very interesting because I didn't anticipate the effect to happen so soon, but we're already seeing the beginnings of the Trump economy. In our final story, especially considering what has happened with U.S. aid, Trump and Zelensky, the Ukraine deal, Zelensky going to a NATO meeting in Europe without the U.S. and Europe standing in solidarity and getting ready to arm them and all this sort of thing, even though they have already been and they've spent 2 times the money we have. Arnaud Bertrand, I love this guy. He's really cool. And I should follow him if I don't. I guess I don't. I should. I love this analysis of the foreign policy era, and it's the end that I really want to read to you. It says here, you can either view it as decline. He says up here that the U.S. is effectively saying, our attempt at running the world is over, to each his own, we're now just another great power, not the indispensable nation. And it says here, hegemony was going to end sooner rather than later, and now the U.S. is basically choosing to end it on its own terms. It's the post-American world order brought to you by America itself. You can either view it as decline because it doesn't unquestionably look like the end of the American empire, or as avoiding further decline, controlled withdrawal from imperial commitments in order to focus resources on core national interests, rather than being forced into an even messier retreat at a later stage. In any case, it is the end of an era, and while the Trump administration looks like chaos to many observers, they're probably much more attuned to the changing realities of the world and their own country's predicament than their predecessors. Acknowledging the existence of a multipolar world and choosing to operate within it rather than trying to maintain an increasingly costly global hegemony couldn't be delayed much further. It looks messy, but it's probably better than maintaining the fiction of American primacy until it eventually collapses under its own weight. This is not to say that the U.S. won't continue to wreak havoc on the world, and in fact we might be seeing it become even more aggressive than before. Because when it was badly and very hypocritically trying to maintain some semblance of self-proclaimed rules-based order, it now doesn't even have to pretend it is under any constraint, not even the constraint of playing nice with allies. It's the end of the U.S. empire, but definitely not the end of the U.S. as a major disruptive force in world affairs. All in all, this transformation may mark one of the most significant shifts in international relations since the fall of the Soviet Union. And those most unprepared for it, as is already painfully obvious, are America's vassals caught completely flat-footed by the realization that the patron they've relied on for decades is now treating them as just another set of countries to negotiate with. And I thought that was incredibly incredibly prescient about the changing nature of the global world order, and it honestly perfectly encapsulates exactly what I was feeling. I'm probably going to write about this more in future, about the kind of the shifting sands. It's something I remember a decade ago reading in Foreign Affairs, and we were there. The conversation in policy diplomacy circles was already kind of starting about this, and I was wondering when and how it would come to pass and who would lead it. And as it turns out, it's a reality TV star, and it's now, which is very sad. So, all right, everyone, it is 7 minutes after 8. This comment was funny, and I enjoy it. Can't wait to vote for the one candidate for president for the next 20 years. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But that's all from me, folks. Thank you so much for watching. This week we have a great set of videos. There's new clips and stuff coming out, so make sure to check out the YouTube channel on all of that. Make sure to follow me on socials at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, Instagram. Thank you. I will feel better. And don't forget to, if you're a business watcher and you want to see me talk about business and market trends, go to my LinkedIn, Cameron Cowan, and subscribe to my exclusive newsletter there. If you want the general newsletter for everyone, CameronJournal.com, you can sign up anywhere. And thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to go be quiet because my throat is done. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow night, 9 p.m. We're going to do Trump's joint session. So, see you all here tomorrow. All right. Have a great night, everyone. Bye-bye.